morning, everyone. My name is Mariana Silva, pronounced she, her, hers. Welcome to our reading festival. Dear faculty colleagues, administrators, students, and Miracosta lovely community. It gives me a lot of privilege to introduce our amazing writer, Reading Festival author, Sonia Gutierrez. As most of you know, every spring, the CLC takes great pleasure in organizing a reading festival in which we try to promote literacy and inspire our students not just to read, but also to write. And I think our writers continue to do that every year, and we're very honored to be part of this event and welcome our writers every year. Today, we not only have a writer, but we have our very own Sonia Gutierrez. A lot of you know her, but maybe not all of you know who Sonia is. So I have the honor of introducing Sonia to you. Sonia Gutierrez is the recipient of the Tomas Rivera Book Award 2021 for her novel, Dreaming with Mariposas. In 2021, Sonia also received the honorable mention for the Isabel Allende Most Inspirational Fiction Award for the same book, Dreaming with Mariposas. Sonia is also the author of Spider Woman, La Mujer Araña. Please excuse my Spanish if I don't pronounce it correctly. And she's also the co-editor for the Writer's Response. She also teaches, if you can believe that, right? She's so busy. She teaches critical thinking and writing, creative writing at Miracosta College, women's gender and sexuality studies at California State University, San Marcos, and recently joined the Puente Project of Palomar College. Sonia's bilingual poetry collection, Paper Birds, Pájaros de Papel, is coming this year in 2021. Presently, Sonia is working on her first picture book, The Adventures of a Burrito Flying Saucer, and poetry collection, Sana Sana Colita de Rana. I am so pleased to have Sonia here with us. And I think most of you know Sonia's novel, Dreaming with Mariposas. I wanted to briefly read of a quote from Angelica M. Llanes. I hope it's Angelica for Angelica. Sonia Gutierrez invites us to dream in her world made up of literary skill as we follow the mundane and miraculous ways migrant families exist in the United States. She brilliantly humanizes these experiences as we get to know Sofia and Paloma, two brown girls growing up in North County, San Diego. Gutierrez provides a window of opportunity to understand transregional knowledge of border life between San Diego and Tijuana through a sharp lens of race, gender, class, and doctors that live in another country. Without further ado, I want to give the floor to Sonia Gutierrez, my colleague and friend. So thank you so much for your time and for being with us, Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for connecting. I see so many participants. So I see your comments. Yes, I do teach at Miracosta College. So this semester I'm teaching English 201, and that's the critical thinking, composition, and literature class. So this summer I'm going to be teaching, I believe, the introduction to literature class. So if you're interested, sign up for my class. So I want to begin today with a poem. And this poem is called Rising Rosa. Rising Rosa. A tiny little rose with swirling yellows and reds, standing 7 inches tall, woke up this morning to tell me, breathe deeply when your head hangs low. And when you forget, the smell of a tiny little rose like me, breathe deeper. Last week, my petals were caught in a downpour, and today, the sun with its long fingertips turned life's muggy colors into a cobalt blue. Right, so I wanted to start with the poem Rising Rosa, because that's how I started writing. I didn't know I was writing. I was about 24 years old. I was already a graduate student at CSUSM San Marcos, and I would have, no, I didn't have any money. And I wanted to give my father a gift for Father's Day. I wanted to give my mom, a Mother's Day gift, but there was no money. Like, what was I to do? And I remember I worked at San Marcos High School, and words came to me, and I knew that I didn't have money, but I could write, and that's how I discovered my poetic voice. Sadly, my parents couldn't read the poems, so I had to come up with a brilliant idea. Like, how could my parents possibly appreciate these words written on a page that they couldn't read? So what I did is I printed out the poem. I went to Pick and Save, and then I looked for a beautiful frame, those ones that were like $50, but then they cost you like $2 to $3. And I matched up the font, I matched up the frame, and it was a beautiful gift that my mom and my father appreciated. And my mom, whenever her friends would come over, she would say, "Comadre, look what my Sonita gave me, my little Sonia." And then the comadre would read the poem to my mom. And so it gave my mom, I could tell she was very proud. I didn't call myself a poet then because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that I was writing poetry. So then I was selected to go teach in Spain. And in Spain, the poems came coming to me. And so I would do like cutouts of anything that I would find in a magazine, and then I would put it on like a folder, like a collage, and then I'd keep my poems in there. And so what happened is that my roommate's friends were over, and somebody saw my collection of poems, and they opened it and they kind of giggled and kind of laughed and said, "Oh, she's a poet." But it was funny because, as you know, as you've probably discovered, is that humor is not universal. So one of the poems that was a very serious poem to somebody from Italy was actually a very funny poem. So that's how I started writing poetry. I want to end with a poem when we have our talk. Well, I'm going to be speaking. So I want to tell you about the early Sonia Gutierrez child, and how was it possible for a child whose parents didn't speak English, whose parents did not know how to write. How does this child become a professor? How does this child become a poet? How does this child become a writer? And how does this child become a voice for her community? It was very clear for me as a child that there was an adult world, and that adult world did not make sense. And as a child, I could already see and identify logical fallacies. Do me a favor, look up the list of logical fallacies. I couldn't tell you the name of the fallacy, but I knew that it was off. The thinking was off. And that's why I teach critical thinking and writing now. I remember one time at a CCD class on Saturdays, the children were saying that roses were evil. And for me, a young child, it was like, how is it possible the roses could be evil. And I was already obviously noticing that they had committed a faulty analogy. I couldn't tell them, that doesn't make sense. But I could see that the children were saying that roses were evil because Jesus had a crown of thorns. And that's why to the children, the thorns were evil. And so that's how I was as a child. I was already thinking critically, not on my own. That means that even though my father could not read or write, he was a critical thinker. So for my father, what he did, maybe we were about 5, 6, 7 years old. He would sit down in a chair, and then he would sit us in front of him or to his side, and he'd ask us a question. And he'd expect a response. And sometimes he would tell me, "You're not ready yet." And I didn't understand my father, like what that meant, like I'm not ready yet for what? And then my sister, who is inspired, I'm inspired by my sister for the character of Paloma. And my sister, she was very good at responding these answers. So that's how I became a critical thinker. Yes, education gives us a degree, and education allows us to teach. In my case, these classes. However, critical thinking was modeled for me as a child. As I'm telling you, my father was like an Aristotle, right, with questions, and we would think about them and then we would respond. That's what I encourage my children. My children are now 14-year-old non-binary, and then my 10-year-old. And I talk to them after class, after school, their school. I always, I want to know about their school, how it went. And sometimes they tell me, they got frustrated with perhaps a teacher, what the teacher said. And so I encourage them to think about, your teacher's historical context and your teacher's lens, and where that teacher gets their ideas. So that's like Sonia, the child, and that's how I became. It makes sense, right? That I was an inquisitive child that was always very curious, and it's the perfect place, right, for somebody like me, that I became a professor. As a teenager, Sonia was a contestona, right? Inspired by Chofi, Sofia in the novel. And a contestona would be the equivalent of, could we say, like a big mouth child, right? That child that talks back, right, to the parents. But what I have to say is that I don't think it's a stereotypical contestona, which is loud and rude. I was the contestona that just simply used my tone that I'm using, and then I had a question, right, for my parents. So that was the teenager child that continued to question, could question society. And then there was Sonia, the college student. And I know that you're experiencing college. In my case, my father knew that we were going to go to college. That was, his dream. But the fascinating thing about my father didn't understand about having to go to the college that specializes in whatever you want to major. And my father would say, "Mija, pero ¿para qué te quieres ir tan lejos? Si ahí tienes la universidad." So it was like, why do you want to go away for college? Like college, like you have the community college, right? In San Marcos, Palomar College. And then you had the university. The university was in San Marcos. So that means that I went to Vista. I went to San Marcos schools. I went to Palomar College. And then I transferred to CSUSM. I have to tell you my transfer story, okay? Because sometimes you think of, oh, she's a writer, she's a professor, and we think about that person's path. But I've heard, because we talk to people, there are people that don't know how to transfer. So they stay at the community college for 5 years, for 6 years, for 7 years, for 10 years. Okay. My case is that I was very lucky that I did not know the transfer process. So check this out. So I was working at San Marcos High School. I didn't know about the transfer process. And luckily for me, I had one of my coworkers was also probably in her early 20s like me. And she said, Vanessa said, Sonia, I remember you mentioned that you missed the transfer or something about transfer. Here's this flyer. And I said, okay. It said Open University Day. I had no idea what I was doing, but it said to take your transcripts with you. So I show up on Saturday, I have my transcripts, I'm in line, I don't know really what I'm doing. So I get to the front, there's an African-American woman at the front. She looks at my transcript, she prints out a letter that says, congratulations, you've been accepted to California State University, San Marcos. And I was like, what? I just got accepted to the university. So that's how I transferred. Can you believe that story? I want to tell you something. If you can make it at the community college, you're going to make it at the university. Sometimes we're afraid. We're afraid that, if people are college material, people are afraid if they're going to be able to do, complete the assignments at the university level. You are ready. Like if you are completing your classes at Miracosta College, you're going to make it. You will. How do I know this? Because we prepare you for the writing. We prepare you for the math that you're going to be doing at the university. And I know that because I went through that. And also, I don't know if you know, but that means that our community colleges throughout the United States have an excellent retention at the university and success, right? So you have to believe that once you transfer and you go to the college, maybe it might be your dream college, or it might be, the college that your parents say you go to Cal State San Marcos because it's in our neighborhood. Well, you do that regardless, right? We don't know what's going to happen in our lives. So for instance, in my case, I had my bachelor's, and then I ended up going to Spain to teach. Can you believe that? It happens like that in my life. There's a thought, I think about it, and then it becomes true. So in my case, I wanted to ask a question in the Spanish department. So I walked over to another building, and then I talked to Dr. Darcy Strother. Her husband was a chair, but he was busy. So I ended up talking to her, and I said, I want to know if I can take classes in your department and they can count as literature. Because for me, it felt like CSUSM was small at the time that I was attending. My department felt small for me. So I knew that I could speak. I couldn't write at the academic level in Spanish, but I knew that I could read. So then she said that was a brilliant idea, and it actually did. It did happen. I ended up taking about maybe 4 or 5 classes in the Spanish department. That's how I met my partner. He was the one that would edit my work. Okay, so I've done a little bit of storytelling, and I'll go back to storytelling. What if I read a couple vignettes. If you have the book in front of you, let's go ahead and do las muy, muy. So for the department, for some of you actually had an opportunity to listen to my voice. So I'll try not to overlap the stories, but maybe you do want to hear that one, right? It's a different experience. Las muy, muy. At our new school, San Marcos Elementary, no more than 100 feet away from our house on West San Marcos Boulevard, we were las que se creían muy, muy, the ones who thought they were all that. Not because we were spoiled, but because we only spoke English at school. Ironically, the kids at our new school didn't know we were coming from Vista Santa Fe Elementary, an English-only school. I see, se creen muy, muy, said Yenny with her imposing short stature as she dug her little white tennis shoe on the playground's black asphalt and pushed her small frame forward with her arms crossed. At school, the voices echoed through the hallways as we walked by. They only want to speak English. Look at them. They only speak English. Se creen muy, muy. Se creen muy, muy, muy. But because of Miss Clifton, our teacher, talked privately to Yenny and the girls who taunted us most and explained why we only spoke English at school, the bullying stopped. Many of the students at San Marcos Elementary had been born here, but they didn't speak English. We, the Martinez sisters, had become miniature robots with on and off switches, programmed to only speak English at school and Spanish at home, even when Dad wasn't around. Father had made it very clear. We would only be speaking Spanish at home. Aquí en esta pinche casa solo se habla español, he would say as his throat tightened and turned rooster red. And our Mexican father was no joke. For someone like my father, who upheld Mexican standards, since it would be embarrassing for a Mexican born to raise children who didn't speak Spanish. Or God forbid, Mexican parents raise a child with a Pocho accent who spoke Spanglish, or a child who didn't speak Spanish at all. One Christmas, the school sent us home with a Christmas gift booklet. If our class sold the most items, we would get an ice cream party as a reward. And because I wanted to win an ice cream treat, I walked on East Los Angeles Street. Next to our apartment complex, selling what my parents couldn't afford, I stood at the door on East Indian Rock Street, feeling overwhelmed by the flood of questions and answered, I don't speak Spanish. When those words escaped my mouth, I didn't know where they had come from. What I did know is Dad would never find out about this incident. Never, never, nunca, nunca. So this is Las Muy Muy. And if we think about the historical context of that era of the 80s and what children were going through during that era, it was English only anti-immigrant sentiment that I was sensing as a child. And what led me, right, as a child, that even though my father had taught me to be very brave, to be outspoken, to embrace Spanish, that means that the society, right, that I was living in was affecting me. To this day, I don't know. That one was inspired by real life. I don't know if I've had that conversation with my father. I would like to save the pain, right? However, Spanglish won, because the title is Dreaming with Mariposas, dreaming in English with English and mariposas in Spanish. So I have primos, I have cousins who don't speak Spanish, right? And who very likely were called derogatory words like pocho, regardless if my cousins speak or Spanish or not. I still love them, and they're my cousins. So yes, um, let's do another vignette. I want to read you this one. I know that I believe this is one of the ones that you listen to, but I think it's important, right, to honor our heritage, to honor our ancestors as Latinos. As you know, we come from a colonized group, and it's beautiful, right, to remember, to talk to our parents, and for them to share what we call cultural capital. So this one is about a grandmother that I never had an opportunity to meet. Unfortunately, cancer runs through my genes. So that means that my grandmother, I never had an opportunity to meet her. It was very painful for my mother to look at this photo when I was growing up. My abuelita Aurora Ramirez Cisneros. And then one day I found it because I was a curious child. And I said, this photo, like, tell me about this photo. And she said, oh, this is my mother. So I didn't want to add those details, right, to the novel, or even at the end, in the afterword. I just needed her to be present, right? She was, I believe, the reason why I also wrote Dreaming with Mariposas. I was teaching students to write like writers, because I started teaching at a campus, Mount San Jacinto, and they gave me a rule. Can you believe this? To teach freshman composition, they were going to allow me to teach nonfiction. However, I could not teach literature, and I was shocked. I was like, wow, like I just graduated, and our dream is to teach literature, fiction, nonfiction, regardless. It's what we love. And so with this rule, I was like, you watch me. I'm going to teach students to write, and I'm going to teach them to write like writers. And meaning that if you are writing like a writer, of course you're going to use the rhetorical approaches that we see in literature. You're going to see poetic diction, you're going to see dialogue, you're going to see characterization. Those are all rhetorical approaches that writers employ in their writing. So I said, there you go. You're not going to stop me from teaching them how to write. So it's called Dreaming with Aurora. This is a vignette that appears in Dreaming with Mariposas. I'm on page 137, in case you have the book. Dreaming with Aurora. Ay, qué bonito es volar a las 2 de la mañana. A las 2 de la mañana. Ay, qué bonito es volar. Ay, mamá. La bruja. It was November, in the time of memories and dreams. She wore her long hair black down over her shoulders, and her favorite white gown touched her calves. Her bare feet were dry like the desert dust, craving for a drop of water. Under the cherimoya tree, she sat on a concrete bench for a few minutes and then continued her journey. She saw the rabbit on the moon peer through the tall almond tree heavy with flowers. Its leaves glistened and danced feverishly as she passed by. Even though the smell of eucalyptus trees permeated the backyard, she couldn't smell as much as she tried. Something else called her, a smell more powerful. The smell of the bright orange cempasúchil flowers. As she got closer to the backside of the house, She recognized the geranium clay pots lying alongside the house. The estafiate and the ruda plants were well taken care of. For a second, she thought they were hers. But as she approached the bedroom window, she saw her face reflected. She didn't know if she was La Llorona or a bruja, or the two of them in one. Through her eyes, she didn't look terrifying. Not to herself. Looking at her face did startle her a bit, but what startled her most were her feet. They weren't touching the ground. Her body moved slowly, heavy with time on her shoulders, to her altar. Where she found her picture in a wooden frame, the only picture of her, the one with her hair tied in a long braid. The candle's flame flickered, and the red, bright pink, royal blue, green, and yellow ribbon hanging from the window's frame swayed as she moved to a corner in the living room next to La Virgen de Guadalupe. Her favorite dish, mole rojo, frijoles, and arroz, was still warm with her daughter and granddaughter's hands. Next to the mole, her family had placed a glass of water to quench her thirst. She remembered who she was. She was Aurora. And her granddaughters, Paloma and Sofia, had guided her to the place of the living. After reuniting with family members placed next to her on the family altar, Aurora then visited Elena. Sleeping next to her husband, she found her in the same position she slept as a child. Her Elenita had her beloved Fortino's hair, wavy like the ocean waves. Staring at her granddaughter's grown woman's face, Elena woke up. Aurora leaned over and kissed her daughter on the forehead. Elena woke up, stayed still, and asked, "Mamá, ¿eres tú?" With no answer and heavy with sleep, she went back to dreaming. In the morning, I woke up confident. My abuelita had visited her altar. Both Paloma and I had set up for her the night before. I sat on my bed, recollecting my dreams, and rose to my feet and stared out the window. I had dreamt I was walking. No, I was floating like La Llorona, but wasn't sure if the woman in my dream was Abuelita Aurora, a bruja, or La Llorona. It was November, in the time. Ay de mi llorona, 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 llévame al río. Tápame con tu rebozo, llorona, porque me muero de frío. And so there's so many connections here, right? To my ghosts, to my spirits, to a photo, right? That I never had an opportunity to meet this grandmother. However, this is the power of writing, right? That we have the power to create and connect in spirit to this woman, you know, that I never met. As a writer and as a creator, I once had a fellow poet from Baja California who told me, who are you competing with? And I was like, what? Competing? I'm not competing. I'm writing this for me, for the world. And I thought it was an interesting assumption. And so how I responded was, my grandmother, she passed away of cancer. My mom passed away of cancer, age 59. My grandmother, the one that I showed you the photograph of, in her probably 30s. So I've been racing myself. That's the only person that I'm competing with. So I wanted to share that detail. Um, we can go back to the storytelling, right? So I told you about my childhood and inquisitive nature, high school, college. Let's talk a little bit about the choque cultural, like a little bit of culture shock of college. Not to say that it's going to be your experience, right? That's not going to be your experience, because sometimes we may not understand like what will be difficult for a student. You're not going to believe what was difficult for me as a student at CSUSM. I had grown up with trees. My college, my community college, had an arboretum. So when I went to CSUSM, back in 1996, there was no trees. It's not the beautiful campus that it was when I was a student. So there's a lot of comparisons to it, looking like a prison. So for me, that institution felt bare, felt like we would sometimes even find some like underground type of doors maybe that we weren't supposed to know that existed. It wasn't really underground. It was kind of like on the side of Craven Hall. We found like a secret room maybe for janitors. So yeah, believe it or not, that's what was difficult about the university, the environment, that it was just bare. The classes, luckily by then, I could speak. I found my voice. I didn't have an issue sharing, except for one class. I don't think I've ever talked about this, and I feel comfortable sharing it with you. I remember being in a class. I was in a group. The class was mostly white, and something happened when I was presenting that I think maybe for the first time I had realized that I didn't look like the people in the class. And it took me a while to be able to respond. And don't stress about that, right? What we always have to do is, and I made the handout for you. So the poem Rising Rosa, always, if you're gonna have a presentation, you have to meditate. You have to think about how you're feeling. If you're feeling too sad or too happy, like you have to find balance. So just do like a breathing exercise and just imagine a beautiful flower, and then clear your throat. And you want to make sure that your body, right? If you're standing, you might look like a penguin, like it's flapping, because we're nervous, right? So you always want to make sure that you breathe and that you know how you're feeling, so that way we won't have a difficult time when we're sharing. But nobody told me that. Nobody told me that as a student. I remember taking Speech 100, but Speech 100 doesn't discuss what if you find yourself in a group of people that you don't realize you don't look like, right? So again, I'm sure that will not happen to you, but just always remember the breathing. Okay, so you just kind of meditate a little bit before you have a presentation, and you have to know yourself, right? I had another incident with a poem. It was a poem that I read in Oakland at the Intertribal Center in Oakland. And my partner went with me, and it was a beautiful, beautiful event. And when I got to my second poem, I started crying. And what I learned is that I can write, and as a creative writer, I have the poetic license to change, and I can be inspired, and that's part of my creativity. However, the pain is still there, even if we change the character. So that one was about a Mayan couple and a desire to have a child. And that's what happened. That when I would read it to my partner, Paulino, that I was really strong. That's how I'm going to read it. I practiced when I was at the event. Most of the attendees were women, and it just the pain. I felt the pain, and I had to walk off stage. I think I I think I got to the second poem, and then the third poem was the one that was about miscarriage. So you have to honor yourself and know how you feel when we're in college. Okay, so know that. Let's go ahead and continue with another poem, and not poem, vignette. So I have one that's highlighted, that's marked. Thank you. I'm seeing all your comments, and maybe I'm gonna have an opportunity to look at all of them. Let's see. I want to read you the last one. I think it's okay to read the last vignette. Is that okay? Or maybe I would give it away for the people that are connecting. Yeah, maybe it's not fair. Let's go ahead and do the one before the endings, in case anybody wants to read the book and be like, oh, she ruined it for us. So we are in college, and it's beautiful to have the support of an institution like Miracosta College. Always remember that every campus that you go to has resources, and to never be afraid to ask for help. Because unfortunately, sometimes, a lot of times, right? For instance, with young men, right? They've been taught that they have to be self-sufficient, that they know everything, or they should know everything. And sometimes that creates a barrier, like not being able to look for resources. So there's this one that is called In the Place of Books. So remember, in the book, Chofi, her father, tells everybody she's gonna, my daughters are gonna go to college. They're gonna go to college, and then finally, Chofi's there, and she realizes that this is just like my backyard. There's trees, there's birds, there's a bench. They have that there at the college too. And so let me read you In the Place of Books. And this, you're gonna find out that the character flees, with Paloma, the sister. At the end, there's the theme of alcoholism. And so Chofi is doing her best to survive. Okay. In the Place of Books. Away from home, we regain our strength as we learn to walk from the first time on our own 2 feet. On campus, I could forget about Dad's grudge for leaving the house, even though he was the one who kicked Paloma out and I followed. After the heartache he put us through, Dad couldn't deny we were his Rocky girls. Like Abuela Chucha, I'm calling my father back because he's worth our abuela's love medicine. I don't look for cross streets like my grandmother. I just close my eyes. Imagine my father, and I call him back with my thoughts. Appa. Because of Dad, I felt safe at school, since he taught me to keep boys with bad intentions at a distance and stay focused on the college path. And he taught me to strike back if necessary, with my closed fist or anything within reach. After my health class on my way to the restroom, Rico, the guy in one of my classes, asked, "Aren't you afraid?" As he stared at me, I replied with the question, "Afraid of what?" "Those books." He pointed at a psychology textbook, an anthology of literature, and 2 novels I carried under my arm. I stared down at my books, but I didn't see hissing snakes trying to bite my hand. No, not at all. I just have to read the books, make sense of the words on the pages, I answered with a smirk and chuckled as I walked to the parking lot. Rico headed to his next class, and I kept thinking about his question on my drive to Doña Paula's, our temporary living space for a few weeks Aren't you afraid? Was I supposed to be afraid of books? Was Rico afraid of books? Were people afraid of books? The books I carried under my arm compiled stories just like Ama and Apa's stories. In Psychology 101 and Professor Gabone's literature class, we interpreted signs and symbols, just like my mother interpreted our dreams. Reading and writing didn't scare me either. College, the place of books, wasn't scary at all. Spirits I dreamed didn't scare me, not ghosts type like Abuelita Aurora, but yes, the drinking type, because I had witnessed Dad's transformation from a kind-hearted father, although overprotective, to an angry totalitarian, imagining evil spirits. Since Professor Gowin read my work to his colleagues and I had done well in English classes, I took it as a sign and signed up for journalism for the summer. Why not? If I could write for a college English class, I could write for Journalism 101 and write stories for the school newspaper. I was hungry for stories, hungry for telling stories, and look forward to my first day of summer classes. As soon as I got home, I called Mom to share important news. I twirled the phone's extension cord between my fingers while waiting for Mom to pick up the phone. Hola, ¿quién habla? I heard my mother's familiar voice and Paco singing in the background. Ama, it's Sofia. ¿Cómo está? Is Dad still angry at Paloma and me? I'm feeling better, mija. Yes, you know your father. ¿Qué pasó, mija? Ay, mija, are you pregnant? No, Ama. Why would you ask me that? I want to tell you something very important. I decided on my major, journalism. I'm starting my first journalism class next week. Journalism? Qué bueno, mija. Will it make you happy, Sofia? I think so, Ama. On the phone, I smiled like a Martinez Ramirez, even though Mom couldn't see my face beaming with joy. Qué bueno, Chofi. As you have learned, writing comes with responsibility. Remember when Irma and you protested at St. Mark's? Readers weren't happy about the protest or the article in the San Diego Times. And even though Father Diego had to leave, the church made sure it replaced him with a bilingual priest who spoke Spanish. I know, Ama, you were so embarrassed when you and your comadres found out about the article in the newspaper. But haven't you and Dad always taught Paloma and me to tell the truth? Isn't journalism the same? Sí, Sofia, you're right. Being a liar and an hablador isn't good. Como dice el refrán, al que obra mal, se le pudre el tamal. I don't know if you remember, but your dad had a cousin who was studying to be a journalist in Mexico City. Really, Ama? My eyes brightened with the news. Why couldn't I remember this important detail? Yes, he was one of the students assassinated in La Matanza de Tlatelolco. Oh my God, Ama, I can't believe what you're telling me. Your uncle attended UNAM in Mexico City. La Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Miguel Martinez Solorio, that was his name. Your father's cousin. Do you remember his picture? I do, Ama. He's the one with the Superman curl. I remember the small black and white photo shaped like an oval in our Burgundy family album. I might even look into writing in Spanish like my uncle for UCSD's Voz Fronteriza. Professor Gallimoni mentioned during his office hours. There are a bunch of writers like me. I just need to look for them. Mija, let me look for your uncle's photograph in our album. Please do, Ama. I wanted to know everything about Tío Miguel, especially now I knew someone in our family had studied journalism in Mexico. Sofia, did you and Paloma sit down with Jose Armando to sign the paperwork? We're signing the loan documents tomorrow, Ama. Don't worry. Okay, Ama. I have to head to work now. Say hi to Cruz and give him a big hug for me. Te quiero mucho, Ama. Nos vemos pronto. Yo también, mija. Échale ganas, Sofía. Tú puedes, mija. Remember to take a nap if you get tired and drink water before you go to sleep. Salúdeme a Doña Paula. Okay, Ama, I'm drinking more water, I swear. All right. So this is in the place of books, right? And this one, it was inspired in real life. I remember my father telling me that one of his cousins disappeared, and he was studying in Mexico. And I wrote this again. It's my creative process that comes up with stories. When I created my own story about this Uncle Miguel, and I needed to know the real story. So I reached out to through Facebook with people that knew this cousin. And it turns out, guess what? So he was studying medicine. And the only thing they found of his was, I think they found like his ring, like when they went back to his room, they found a ring. So my uncle, my dad's first cousin, was one of the missing. And I think this goes back to like the story of Aurora, right? Like as a creative writer, it's a healing process for me, right? To come to terms, right, with not having grandparents. And then also in the beginning of the novel, the trophy describes his uncle, right? And he's kind of like here and not here because he's in spirit. And so at the end, right, as a creative writer, when you're writing a novel, you know, that all comes together in, you know, the opening and then the conclusion, and he comes back. So in the last vignette, right, that's not fair if I would have read it, but there's the reference to Tio Miguel, and then he's gonna return in the last vignette. So that's what inspired me. It wasn't journalism. I created Chofi, and I wanted her to be a journalist. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit of insight. I'm noticing that it is 11:25. Can you believe that? So remember, I promised you that I wanted to conclude with a poem. So sometimes in life, as life is, we have dreams, we try really hard, and what is in our mind doesn't sometimes happen, and it's okay, right? Because it opens other doors. So I remember that I had been invited. Somebody said, "Oh, apply to." They're looking for somebody to teach creative writing for Chicano literature, for Chicano studies over at San Diego State. So I thought, yeah, you know, at one point, I think when I was younger, it would be like people would tell me something and I'd be like, why me? But then I was like, yeah, of course me, right? Because we know what we know. And so I did apply for that one particular class, and I did teach it. And then after that, I did a full-time intern at Mount San Jacinto. So I want to share a poem that came to me as I was in the elevator at San Diego State in the Human Resources Office. So to conclude, I want to read you Doors. Doors. There are doors that open on their own, but there are other doors that even though they are crumbling, they are locked under invisible triple locks. Their keys are at the bottom of the ocean floor, surrounded by white sharks. Those doors, do not attempt to open them on whims or with blows. Instead, roll up your sleeves Build doors with paints and brushes, nails and a hammer, or with the magic wand of your imagination. And one day, you will suddenly see foundations with friendly doors greet you. You will enter, turn back, and see from afar those ancient doors only have a few borrowed centuries left. And that one came to me at the elevator over at SDSU, which means that a door closed for me, but then SDSU opened for me. And then some doors close, and then I end up at CSUSM. So thank you everybody for joining us. I want to thank my colleagues, Professor Mariana Silva, who I know through DEC, the Diversity, Equity, and Cultural Competency Committee. And also I want to thank my colleague, Angela Seningaglia. Thank you so much. And we met through the Curriculum Collective. And I know I'm missing one word, I apologize. And I want to thank Maria, who's behind the scenes. I forgot the last name. And I want to thank Yaramir Mendoza, who's doing all the tech support. And I want to thank everybody who wrote a comment, and I will I'll go through them. Okay, I swear I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sonia. We have a question from Rosalinda. Is that okay if she addresses that question?
Yeah.
So Rosalinda, I think you can go ahead and talk, and Maria and Yadimir, if you can allow her to speak. Thank you, Rosalinda.
Hello, Rosalinda. If you would be able to unmute yourself, you'll be able to ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. I did. What a beautiful reading. Thank you so much, Sonia. I'm currently teaching personal food narrative in my English freshman composition course. And I'm wondering if you could recommend one or more of your vignettes in this collection that might be useful in teaching the food narrative, that might be inspiring in my students writing their own stories.
Yes, thank you so much, Rosalinda, for that comment, and thank you. Yes, I do have one in mind for your class, and it's one about tamales. And that particular tamales one was actually published by Bisache in Texas, and you're not gonna believe it. Dagoberto Guild, the Chicano author himself, wrote me an email and said that he wasn't just going to publish one vignette, but he wanted to publish 3 of them. And he picked the one about tamales. It's going to be an incredible vignette that you're going to see why I'm telling you to select that one. Why don't we do this, Rosalinda? Why don't we exchange emails so I can write you an email? And there's another one, Rosalinda, the one about Chofi and the grandfather is making tortillas de harina. So the Spanish heritage comes through the abuelo. And so I do know that as Mexicans, the heritage is maiz, right? And that's why I made the one about tamales, and then the one about tortillas de harina through the abuelo. So how do I get your, so would it be R Salazar at Miracosta?
No, I actually teach at Sacramento City College.
Oh my goodness. So you're
right.
Like up north. I'm like, why don't I know Rosalinda from our campus?
Well, my sister actually teaches in kinesiology at Miracosta.
Oh, how exciting.
Yes, but anyway, I visit Oceanside several times a year, but I put my email my email address in the chat. Would you like me to put it in the Q&A as well?
You know, Rosalinda and Sonia, sorry to interrupt. I got your email, so I can give it to Sonia.
Okay, very good.
So yeah, I don't see it anymore because like a lot of comments came through, so it's like earlier. But I know that Mariana will give me your email.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rosalinda, for connecting. Thank you, everybody, for connecting.
De nada.
Gracias.
Does anybody want to address any questions? There's been like an outpouring number of comments, Sonia. To me, what stood out is like, I love to hear your voice reading or singing those songs. I think everything came alive even more than the text itself. Maybe like, especially those songs, they were like, I got so emotional and so much part of the story, even more than the reading, I think, because I just, your voice is just like, it was so wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the heritage, right? That I can share during the 7:30 presentation, right? That is also part of the heritage, right? That voice. You see that one character, Alicia, in the book is inspired. Alicia is three women in my life, and she becomes Alicia. And so there is the singing in the heritage, the Familia Gutierrez. And so I had seen Sandra Cisneros at the Escondido Art Center. I invited my students and only one could go. And so Sandra Cisneros read the epigraph that was lyrics. And then I thought, oh, how interesting. I could definitely, could sing the epigraph. I wouldn't have to read it. I could do that. I think I can sing it. And, eventually, those thoughts as a young woman became a reality now, that with the publication of Dreaming with Mariposas.
I think if you had the chance, it would be nice if you could have an audiobook based on this. It would be so wonderful. Different.
Yeah, with my voice. Yeah, that would be, that's one of the goals, Mariana. That's one of the goals. True.
Wonderful.
And I also want to thank, I don't know if my colleague Erica Duran is connected. Thank you so much, Erica, for your support. She probably had to go. Oh my gosh, Erica's here. Thank you, Erica. Anything I need, I know Erica is always going to be there for me. Thank you, Erica.
And I think I wanted to read Vicente Leal's comment here. Let me go back. So Vicente Leal says, Sonia, thank you so much for your presentation, sharing your experience. It will help us to move forward with our goals and purposes of study and improvement. That was so sweet.
Yes, thank you.
And
thank
our
Mr. Leal.
And now our very own tutor here, John Fuzel. What a powerful storyteller. Lots of great comments here. Rosalinda had to go. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone, students, colleagues. Thank you for joining us and listening to Sonia's story. I hope you all feel inspired to pursue your goals. Find your voices. Sonia said that several times and I resonated with that. And thank you for giving us the time and the space to be with you, Sonia.
Thank you. Yeah, today's going to be a beautiful, busy day. I have one presentation. I teach for Puente. I have the second presentation for the Literary Festival. And then I'm going to take off to the A2 Men conference in Los Angeles with 3 Puente students.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be a beautiful day.
Our student, Jin Hui, is asking, how do you balance your time? I was going to ask you.
I think the secret is to do what you love. And then Mariana, if you remember, we had our guest speaker for DEC. And so we just had to fill out what we are interested in. And it came out that one of my characteristics was stamina. So that means that my brain and my body is like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, it's still going. And then people are like looking at me like, what is wrong with her? And guess what? My father was like that. People were like, is he on drugs or how does he how does he work so much? But I got it from my dad. That's how it happened. I do really love everything. And I just didn't, I remember the stories of like the women writers that, and it's okay, right? They didn't have children because they were writers. But for me, it was, I became a writer after my children. Like I was a poet and then I was a writer, and it's okay, right? It doesn't have to be like the mold that people said it was going to be. You show them that there's another way.
Absolutely. And we evolve differently, right? And we find our voices differently. And that facet of your life, Sonia, I think a lot of people resonate with that side too, being a mother, right? On top of all the other roles that you have daily.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Your children will learn from you. Because for instance, my Quetzal, my firstborn can draw, is writing now poetry. She's self-taught with, what do you call it? Animation, like videos. So your children, like, don't never be afraid, you know, whatever you expose them to will benefit them. My Citlali, my Paulina Citlali, she's my treasure. Like those numbers, she's like the Paloma in the novel. Like I can see like my sister's qualities in her, and I need her, I want her to work on all of that.
Thank you. Does anybody want to ask Sonia any questions directly or typing in the chat?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we may have a question here or a hand up. I think you can unmute if you have a question and go ahead and address it directly to Sonia. So hand up and then it went down. I don't know if it's technical or.
Yeah. Mariana, I wanted to tell you, because usually if I have a presentation, I do have a handout. So I did create a handout with the 2 poems that I read. So I can send that to you via email, and the students will have access to it. And unfortunately, I didn't think about it when we were having the presentation. I could have easily shared the link with the poem.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. Yeah, that would be great. Kimberly, Zara, can't see your full last name. I'm sorry, Kimberly. She says this was my first time. I'm sorry?
Kimberly, I think the last name was Sarate, I think. Sarate? Let me see.
This was my first time learning about you, Sonia. I will definitely be looking for your novels and show my kids. I was impressed by them. Thank you so much. I apologize. I can only see half of your name. I don't know why. I apologize, Kimberly.
Yes, of course, Kimberly. The poetry, bilingual poetry collection, Pájaros de Papel, Paper Birds, Feather by Feather, Pájaros de Papel. You're not going to believe this. So guess who wrote a blur for me? Jimmy Santiago Vaca. So Jimmy Santiago Vaca is just an amazing Chicano whose writing began in prison. So I'm so lucky. Jimmy wrote a blur for me, and then I'm going to have I think first poet laureate of, was it Georgia? The first poet laureate, Ashley Jones, is going to be writing a blurb, and a couple other people are going to be writing me a blurb for that bilingual poetry collection. I'm excited.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. Mm-hmm. You totally deserve it, Sonia. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I paused for a little bit because I didn't know if there are other questions, and I don't want to be the very talkative person here and not allowing the space to our colleagues and community. Are there any other questions? Thank you. There is a hand up. Yes, I think Jose Casas, I think you can unmute and address the question or your comment.
Yes, I just wanted to say that as a almost 70-year-old man, and I was very fortunate to have attended the University of San Diego. I did identify with a lot of her comments, and I did become the first in my family to grow up and go as a farm worker. So I do appreciate her writing, and I do appreciate the validity of her words. And there were a lot of encouragements. As a matter of fact, I actually videotaped the entire presentation because I was so engulfed. I was writing it down, all my comments, but then I started losing track. So then I started videotaping, and I'm glad I did. Anyways, I just wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to be a witness to such greatness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose, and thank you for that anecdote, right, of being at San Diego State, and we are a mirror, right? These are issues that continue to happen to us. With the farmer background, you see that in Dreaming with Mariposas. So we are people of the land, and we protect it.
Thank you so much, Jose. What a touching moment. We're also recording this session. So it will be at some point, probably in about a week or so, we'll have it available on the Miracosta website on their community learning center events. I think we started adding things there, all the events that we've been organizing. So in case you're not in the loop, at least maybe you can check later. Jose, thank you so much. Other comments, questions for Sonia? Angela put the link to, thank you, Angela, to our events page. So the recording of this session will be there as well. So just give it, I would say, about a week just to make sure we have it ready. Thank you so much, Sonia, again, for your time. And thank you, lovely community, for joining us. I hope you feel inspired by Sonia's story to not only write your stories, but pursue your goals, whatever your goals are. And Sonia said, don't be afraid and do what you love. And when you said do what you love, Sonia, you reminded me of one of the quotes that I love from Benjamin Franklin that I don't recall like now word by word, but pretty much it says, do what you love to do and it won't feel a chore.
That's right.
So it's kind of choosing a hobby to be your job. So that's what we chose to do. And I can see that shows in your passion to express yourself and be here with us. Thank you very much. And we'll see Sonia tonight too at 7:30. Thank you for dedicating your time and joining us today, everyone. And thank you very much, Sonia.
Thank you.